Hi, welcome back. For those of you who are joining first time, I am Hasid Thanki, the founder of presentation series called Intro to Individual Life Underwriting. Let's review TIA, Transient Ischemic Attack, TIA or mini stroke or Cerebrovascular Accident, stroke. So let's start with, when I was trying to prepare for this presentation, I reviewed a lot of medical literature, and I would start with throwing a couple of definitions on a TIA. A TIA, just to break it down, as the word says, transient, so it's temporary, short term. Ischemic, so it's not infarction, attack, it's the neurological dysfunction, so to speak, just to simplify. Now, with that, if we get into the definition, there are multiple definitions out there. One way to define is radical developing clinical signs of focal or global disturbance of cerebral function lasting fewer than 24 hours. So my friends, make a note of it. What is key is lasting fewer than 24 hours with no apparent non-vascular cause. Another better definition would be of a TIA is a transient episode of neurological dysfunction caused by focal brain, spinal cord or retinal ischemia without acute infarction. Again, the key aspect is without acute infarction. So take a pause and try to digest this definition. Basically, we are talking about something, neurological dysfunction, that doesn't last beyond 24 hours. And this is a temporary, short term, transient. So the word also helps, TIA. Some literature would describe as a mini stroke, something that you may want to keep in mind. Now let's move on to the cerebrovascular accident, CVA, or stroke. Simply speaking, it's an infarction of the central nerve system tissue, period. A better comprehensive definition could be the sudden death of some brain cells due to the lack of oxygen when the blood flow to the brain is impaired by blockage or rupture of an artery to the brain. A cerebrovascular accident, CVA, is also referred to as a stroke. Make sense? TIA, transient, fully blown stroke, cerebrovascular accident. I thought we look at these two together because they overlap and there are correlations, and as we get into the details you will see why. One aspect, now I'm not going to go through all the anatomy and physiology. You will have to read it, understand it, digest it. But as we underwrite, starting with the Life app, through the medical records that you order, what are the aspects that you need to know to begin with, plus what are the things that you need to be looking for while reviewing the medical records. So those are the aspects, given we are in intro session, that I will try to touch base, just to scratch the surface without going too much into the anatomy and physiology. So one of the key aspects when we consider and look at the CVA cases in life underwriting, one key aspect to look into is CVAs are caused by anything that can cause vascular compromise. So try to digest this. Anything that can cause vascular compromise could be the factor contributing to the CVAs. And broadly speaking, there are four categories, and I'll spell those four categories out. First and foremost, it could be heart related. So say you got a rhythm disturbance, you got a AFib, a PFO, ventricular septal defect, endocarditis. Those are the scenarios frequently encountered that you may come across as you read the medical records. So that is one classification or the cause that leads to vascular compromise. The second one is large blood vessels. Large blood vessels. So in that category, you may have thrombus, atherosclerosis, Takayasu arteritis, giant cell arteritis, fibromuscular dysplasia, or say emboli, or say dissection, Marfan syndrome, or similar conditions. So you need to remember these details. Likewise, there could be intracranial blood vessels. Okay, so again, instead of large blood vessels, another category could be intracranial blood vessels. So again, that could be thrombosis, emboli, dissection, rupture of the blood vessel, and bleeding. So these are all that could be the cause of vascular compromise. Okay, and last but not least, the blood itself. The blood itself can cause the vascular compromise. And when I say blood itself, what are the two major categories? The first category is bleeding tendencies. So you may have complications of anticoagulation medications, hemophilia, and the second category could be clotting tendencies. When we say blood itself, so the second category could be clotting tendencies. So what are we talking here? Probably protein C or protein S deficiency, prothrombin gene mutation, or sickle cell anemia, polycythemia vera, etc. So these are the four major categories that has been identified in the medical literature that can cause vascular compromise when it comes to CVAs. So CVAs are caused by, these are the four major categories. Okay, so this is something very important that you need to know and you need to correlate as you underwrite and as you read the medical records. Another important aspect when we are dealing with CVAs is to understand what are the different types of vascular problem that may occur. Now I know that I don't want to get into the too much anatomy and physiology, but what you need to know, and I'm not going into the definitions of all this, but what type of vascular problem? So it could be inflammation, it could be atherosclerosis, it could be lipohydinosis, it could be aneurysmal dilation, it could be arterial dissection, it could be thrombosis, it could be embolus, or simply rupture of a vessel in the subarachnoid space or intracerebral tissue. So these are the variety of types of vascular problem that can occur, and we need to know these are all important things. And as you read the medical literature, you will see how each of these terms are defined, used, and you will see when you read the medical records, and it will be more meaningful to you. Okay, without going further into the anatomy and physiology, let's talk about the major two categories of stroke that you may encounter. And what are those two major categories of stroke? The first and foremost comes ischemia. So it can happen for different reasons or in a different situation. For example, thrombosis. So like a local obstruction of an artery, okay? Or it could be like embolism. So the debris or the blood clot traveling from elsewhere and lodging into an artery causing obstruction. So that's called embolism. Or you may confront a situation where the medical literature calls systemic hypoperfusion, which basically boils down to general medical condition with lack of blood supply reaching to the brain. Are you with me? So these are the different ways we can have ischemic stroke, and that is the major type of stroke. So out of two major type of stroke, the first and foremost is ischemic stroke, And the second one is hemorrhage. So in hemorrhage, there are broadly speaking two things that you want to know and pay attention to. And first and foremost is subarachnoid hemorrhage. So again, what happens here is that blood vessel ruptures and blood leaks in between the brain and the skull by definition. So that is called subarachnoid hemorrhage. And the second category is the intracerebral hemorrhage, where the bleeding directly into the brain tissue occurs. So the intracerebral hemorrhage is where the bleeding directly into the brain tissue. That is what happens in the latter category. So these are the two major types of stroke, and dealing with law of large numbers, statistically speaking, the majority of the strokes, or I would say about 80% of the strokes are ischemic, and about tentatively 20% are hemorrhagic. So something you want to know. Let's move forward. So what happens when we hear about, oh, somebody has had a stroke? Okay, so what are the signs and symptoms, and how we hear versus what exactly happens with that person? So to better understand that, what you need to know is where the vascular compromise occurs. That is important. So anatomy, physiology wise, say frontal lobe or parietal lobe or temporal lobe or occipital lobe or cerebellum or brainstem, as it may have impact on the language or vision or balance coordination, and likewise on the hand, on the hip, arm, fingers, speech, hearing, smell, etc. Make sense? Okay. Another thing, and it's a common sense, but still need to know, and that is this, that the size of the emboli impacts the size of the infarction. So make a note of this. This is also very important. So pay close attention to the medical records. Now obviously when we talk about CVA, the question comes how the diagnosis is made. So the diagnosis requires review of multiple tests, and there is one out there they call in medical terms CIMT, that's a carotid artery intima media thickness testing. That is the one. Then besides that, as we all know, there could be carotid duplex ultrasound, not to mention about MRI or CT scan, and plus there will be a cardiac evaluation as well, including ECG, echo, cardiac monitoring, and plus there could be other tests like blood cultures, CBC, cell rate, PT, PTT, etc. So the diagnosis requires review of all these tests and the correlation. So something that you may want to make a note of. How about the treatment? Well, as far as the treatment goes, as we see in cardiac, here in neuro also, it could be medication, it could be surgery. The treatment sometimes, the key aspect in treatment is the risk factor modification. So when we say risk factor modification, this is not a new subject. We see in every impairment. So in this case, in CVA, what are the risk factors that we are talking about? Smoking, alcohol, exercise, blood pressure management, lipid lowering therapy. Those are the risk factor modifications that can be very well supportive of whatever medication and or the surgical treatment that has already happened. So this goes long way, and it can have impact on the prognosis or the residuals or the complications for that matter. Likewise, needless to say that if there are any additional impairments, say for example diabetes, so the risk multiplies tremendously. There are data out there that when you have a diabetes with CVAs, it poses tremendous extra mortality. Talking about the mortality, let's go down to what we ultimately want to know as we underwrite the Life Act and as we review the medical records dealing with CVAs. So, to underwrite means to correlate, as we know. So, while reviewing the CVA cases, we need to look out and correlate all these details like at what age, what is the actual diagnosis, what is the time frame, what is the cause, are there any complications, are there any residuals, what are the additional impairments that per se would increase the mortality, plus not to mention about the combo of being that impairment, say diabetes plus CVA, so there will be per se independent additional debits plus combo of debits, plus we need to look at the risk factors that we were just talking about, plus we want to give credit for any stability and or any favorable factors or green flags. Bottom line, you need to follow the life underwriting manual that your company expects you to follow, plus the final modification based on your company specifics. This is just a quick overview of TIA and stroke, and you need to get into all the details about anatomy, physiology to better grasp and pick the right things as you read the medical records. Suffice to say, as far as TIA and stroke, given we are in the intro session, now when we meet again, we will review dermatology. Take care, bye now.